I beg my fellow conservatives and every American and everyone listening to this podcast to think about what you're arguing. We are not as religious. If you're an Orthodox or a strong believer in your faith and you reject this anti-religious secularism, such as we see in America with the Bill Maher's of the world, fine. They have a right to believe that. I disagree with them. I don't believe that it's healthy for society to openly only lift up those voices that reject God and to smother those who don't. I think there should be equality of ideas and equality in debate in public place for all voices, for or against God, for the free practice of faith, the constructions of church, synagogues, or no places of faith. But to say that somehow the defense of Muslim religious freedom will solve the problem of radical Islamism and the threat of immigrants is beyond ignorant. It is suicidal. The problem of Islamic immigration is about the Islamists. The rate of Islamist ideas has yet to be studied, but studies of election outcomes in Egypt and elsewhere, in Turkey with the AKP running, showed that their numbers can be anywhere as low as 20%, all the way up to 40, 45, if not 50% of the population. So Islamism, no different than Christian theocracy was before the American Revolution and all the revolutions in Europe, is the major threat. So neither Macron was correct in some of the avenues of reformation he talked about. He should not necessarily embrace the imams that are only anti-terror, but embrace those that openly reject Islamism. And as Prime Minister Cameron in London, in the UK, talked about years ago, he said in 2011 in his speech in Munich, we need a muscular liberalism. That's what I think as a conservative, and I think liberals should join us in this idea. But when I see conservative writers reject secularism and do so under the altar of protecting Muslims from bigotry and from minority politics, I would tell you that that's intellectual malpractice. Yes, bigotry is growing, and he cites in his piece here, 73% of respondents in France said they had a negative view of Islam. 90% said wearing the headscarf was incompatible with life in French society. 63% thought praying 5 times a day was also incompatible. Okay, yes, I get it. Those are all ideas that are problematic. But how do you fix that? The problem's not the headscarf. The problem is the Islamist movements associated with the headscarf. The problem is not the prayer, but the Salafism, the ultra-orthodoxy associated with those who insist on praying in the streets of Paris instead of praying in their mosques, praying in the parks or wherever at home. It's a difference. There's moderation and celebration of faith versus extremism. We have a saying that I've told you here on this podcast before. Are the Muslims that we work with, embrace the society, are they French who happen to be Muslim or Muslims who demand to be French? It's a big difference. They come into the society demanding rights as Muslims, not as French. We say in America, are we Americans that happen to be Muslim or Muslims who demand to be American? Again, the second part is a victim-minded complex. The first is a humble American one that celebrates the ability to be free, to be religious, to be pious, and to be Muslim. So I can't tell you how important this issue is. We need to come together as Americans, as French, as Germans in each of our countries. But I think the conservative movement needs to begin to look at how to articulate this. Because if we simply use Muslims as a foil to defend religious minority rights, you're going to ignore and in fact empower the Islamists within to continue to dominate our society, that as if the fundamentalists who have the observancy of the faith around their head, around their neck, around their body, in their mosques, wherever it might be, that they somehow are the penultimate Muslims, while those of us who are humbly Muslim at home and in our morality and in our belief system and our character and our integrity, that somehow those Muslims are lesser Muslims because we're not as publicly flailing about our faith. So I think conservatives need to revisit that. Islam is in that time in history in which it's coming to battle with those who seek to hijack and dominate the public place with Islamic identity and marginalize the business community, the reason-based intellectuals. And even, I'm so surprised, even the conservatives are rejecting us in the name of one-upsmanship against the secularists that have now been having this debate against the social conservatives, if you will, in America, that I might agree with on many things, but yet have forgotten what context American Islam, global Islam is in this time in history compared to Western religions.